Welcome back to the Forgive Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Brenda Reese, and I'm really glad that you're here. Today, I'm actually coming to you, if you're on YouTube, you can see this. I am wearing the Seahawks championship sweatshirt on Super Bowl day. Hopefully, I'm doing this before the game. Hopefully, we are going to win. Sorry for those that aren't super, Seahawk fans. But, we're in Washington. We got to support them. So, anyway, I wanted to share with you that over the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about two important ideas. One is that you are not broken. So important. And the second one was that learning to love the woman you have been judging is a practice. Okay. We have to give ourselves some grace. Now, today, I want to talk about something that sits underneath both of those. The feeling that you're behind in life. This is one of the big ones that was on the 10 things that we have trouble forgiving ourselves for, right? This is the one I hear the most often, was there's a lot of regret around the feeling that the women I coach are feeling behind in life, that they're not where, they thought they'd be by now, or they're not as healed, or not as confident, or not as healthy, or a big one is not as fulfilled. So many women carry this quietly. They may look successful on the outside, capable, responsible, often the one that others rely on pretty consistently. Yet inside, there's a soft ache that says, I thought I'd figure this out by now, or I thought I'd be in this relationship by now, or I thought I'd have the career by now. So if that voice lives in you, you're not alone. And nothing about you is wrong. Now, where does this even come from, right? Most of us, as my friend always says, of an interesting age, grew up swimming in invisible timelines. By this age, you should know who you are. By this age, you should be settled. By this age, you should feel confident and certain, married. A lot of us grew up with different you should have, or by this age. But those timelines were created without even accounting for trauma, loss, caretaking, divorce, illness, survival, generational patterns. They don't reflect our real human life. They don't reflect all those cultural expectations. So when you measure yourself against them, it makes sense that you feel behind. But feeling behind doesn't mean you failed. It means your path included things that required your energy in different ways. Okay? Remember, it doesn't mean that you failed, because like me, feeling like a failure was a big deal. It means that our path included things that required our energy in different ways. Now, many women spent, me included, decades in roles that required self-abandonment. That's a big cost, right? Being the strong one, being the responsible one, that was a big one for me. Being the emotional caretaker, being the one who holds everything together. Again, that's me. These roles come with a cost. And what we are finding is that they often delay our relationship with ourselves. They delay it. Not because we didn't care, but because we were busy surviving. So if you're only now starting to ask, at this stage of our life. Who am I? What do I want? What do I need? You're not late. It means you finally have enough space to hear yourself. That's not failure, my friend. That's readiness. Now, what also comes along with this stage of our life is grieving the life you thought you'd have. This is super important. A lot of times, what's underneath the I'm behind in life is grief. Grief for the version of the life that you had imagined. Grief for choices you wish you'd had made differently. Grief for years you spent in patterns that no longer fit who you are now, like I've talked about in the last few episodes. We also grieve our bodies, our health, our physical appearance, let's be real, right? The ways changes us. We grieve seasons ending, children growing up, empty nests, or let's be honest, not empty nests. We grieve identity shifts. We grieve friendships that have faded or completely lost. We grieve loved ones we've lost. We grieve even taking care of aging parents, right? Because of all of the responsibilities and what could have, all the things that come up around that. Sometimes it's a spouse we're taking care of, like I am, or it's a friend or a sibling. And we grieve the quiet exhaustion of holding so much for so long. And I want to share with you that please allow yourself to grieve all of it. None of it is wrong. Name it. Grieve it. Because it is necessary to do that to move forward in our lives. I had a client who recently shared with me that she was actually shocked at learning how much grief she was holding inside herself. She felt amazed, actually, that grief was a part of forgiveness. It's a huge part. And she was so grateful to have a safe container to grieve who she no longer felt she was, because it allowed her to hold space for who she was becoming. She was surprised at the weight she felt she dropped as she experienced on a deeper level the loss of her parents that had happened years before, the loss of friendships, the loss of a business. She thought she had processed all of that. And she had, to a point, to the point that the body would allow at the time with what she was going through, right? Our body really wants to keep us safe. It's not going to let us handle everything all at once. Yet it was showing up for her in how she was holding herself back in her life and in her business, where she wasn't allowing herself to be seen. And the big one, not even allowing herself to be loved by her kids, or spouse, or friends. And by allowing herself to grieve, she really felt lighter, right? Which we hear a lot. And we've witnessed that ourselves, right? Yet she was able to show up in her business in a much stronger, more confident way. She was able to have more conversations, intimate conversations with her husband. She was able to let the kids go, right? And not worry so much about the choices they were making. She really came home to herself. So, my friend, grief is an important part of our lives. It's not just in death that we grieve. It's in the everyday changes of our lives. And when grief isn't addressed, it lives in our bodies, waiting patiently for us to see it to acknowledge it so it can be integrated into who we are. I talked about that. I shared my story about that in the Good Girl Syndrome, and we'll link that in the show notes. Now, after we allow ourselves to acknowledge this grief, the next natural place we often arrive is self-forgiveness. Not because we did something wrong and not because we need to punish ourselves. That's not what this is about. It's because we're beginning to see our lives more clearly, with more honesty, with more context, with more compassion. Self-forgiveness becomes less about erasing the past and more about softening our relationship with it, integrating it into who we are now and who we are allowing ourselves to become. And it's an allowing. Self-forgiveness isn't pretending you don't wish things had been different. Okay? It's not about that. Come on. Sometimes I wish things would be different, but we can catch ourselves a little quicker. Self-forgiveness allows yourself to say, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. Now, I'm not saying that just flippantly, because we hear this, right? I'm serious about this. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time is important because you did. If you would have known different, you would have done different. Self-forgiveness is also allowing yourself to say, I didn't have today's awareness back then. That's big. Self-forgiveness is allowing yourself to say, I didn't have today's support back then. And this is huge. My girlfriends and I will talk about, wow, I wish we had an us back then, right? Now, all of this is not an excuse. Like some people will flippantly say, it's not an excuse. It's an honest acknowledgement of being human. Now, I do want to say self-forgiveness can also sound like, I didn't know then what I know now, right? Maybe that resonates. I made choices based on survival. That was me. And what if I was meant to learn through these so-called bad, I'm going to do air quotes, bad experiences? Now, I also want to keep in mind here that there were the cultural, societal, and familial expectations many of us felt we needed to meet and we had to meet, and we felt that was survival. Because, this is about bringing in compassion. Because along the way, maybe we did some things or said some things to others or ourselves that we wish we wouldn't have done or said. I did. There were days in my drinking days I drove drunk. There was days that, I didn't take care of my kids right. There was a lot of, when I was doing my fourth and fifth step, like I talked about before, there was a lot that I felt regret, guilt, and shame for. So it's really important to bring in the compassion. If we would have known better, we would have done better. But we can learn and grow through these experiences. We don't have to continue to beat ourselves up and hold that over our heads and keep us from moving forward. The world needs us now. We need to learn to trust ourselves now. So to help us get there, what if we take some time, just right now, and try on a little reframe? So if you'd like, take a breath. If that's, if you'd like to, some people don't. So, but for me, it helps me center in my body. And let's see how these feel for you. Okay. How about, I am allowed to learn. I am allowed to change. I am allowed to choose differently going forward. I am allowed to love myself in spite of all that I feel I've done wrong. We can also change this to say, I am willing to believe I can learn. I am willing to believe I can change, or I am willing to allow myself to choose differently going forward. I am willing to love myself in spite of all that I feel I've done wrong. We want this to be a gentle process. And so it's finding the right words that land in your body that don't feel tense, that don't have restriction, but have even a little bit of expansion, right? We want a gentle process, not a forced one. And we don't want to bypass the emotions. I want to share that too, because as we start on this, or if we continue on the deeper levels, oh my God, over the last 4 months, there's been some emotions that came up for me that I'm thinking, what the heck? This is deep stuff. This is guttural stuff. And I don't want to bypass that. I want that to come out. And, we also don't want to bypass any responsibility that we're ready to take for the things that we feel that we have done wrong or different, or we could have done different. There is an amends process, that we can do if we feel we have wronged someone, when it's right, when it's healthy. Okay. And not just because. Now, we want this to be gentle, compassionate, kind, and a grounded experience for you, because a lot of us carry some pretty heavy burdens, things that we feel are secrets. We carry shame, we carry guilt, like I talked about in the last episode of the podcast, all the guilt and shame that I was carrying. That was hard. That was hard to do, to speak it out loud. Yet, oh my God, I felt like I lost 20 pounds. So if you're noticing that you're having a difficult time with any part of self-forgiveness, please reach out to a coach or therapist that can hold you in this space so you can be held in a safe container. Safety is number one as you process these emotions and feelings and thoughts. Okay? This is really important. You really want to be witnessed and validated. That's how we can reconnect back with ourselves. So what if, this is something I hear a lot. So what if you're not late to your life? A lot of women say to me, Brenda, it's too late. But what if you're not late? What if you're right on time for this particular chapter? This chapter where you begin to listen to yourself. This chapter where you start choosing yourself. The chapter where you build a relationship with your body, your needs, and your truth. Not from pressure, but from presence. Not from fear, but from self-trust. I want self-trust to be your new superpower. So instead of asking, why am I behind? You might want to explore, what have I been navigating that others may not see? Instead of asking, wow, what have I survived? Maybe you can explore, what wisdom have I gained along the way? Those questions tell a very different story for you. One of resilience, one of endurance, and one of quiet strength. If you take nothing else from this episode, I really want you to take that you are not behind, because you're not. For many women, midlife is the first time in their lives where they're not primarily defined by who they're caring for, who they're proving themselves to, or who they're trying to please. It's often the first time you get to ask, what do I want? What feels true for me? And what kind of life do I want to build from here? You, my friend, are carrying decades of lived experience. You've loved, you've lost, you've endured, you've adapted. You have survived things that changed you. Midlife isn't evidence that time is running out. It's evidence that you now have the depth, the awareness, and discernment to build a life that actually fits who you are. Right? You're not starting over. You're acknowledging and embodying your wisdom. And you're allowed to meet yourself with love, kindness, compassion, and, where needed, forgiveness. Right here. Right now. Because you matter. You matter a lot. And I really want you to hold that in your heart. And until next time, take care. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, would you do me a favor and share this episode and then follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss one episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast, where every Friday you will get tips, tools, and stories so that you can turn your pain into peace. Take care.